The cowboy only wanted a place to sleep, but 3 Apache widows wanted a husband instead. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the rocks and cacti that dotted the vast landscape. Dust clung to his boots and clothes, and sweat had dried into a rough, salty layer on his skin. Ethan was tired, bone-deep tired, not just from riding all day but from weeks on the trail. He hadn't meant to wander so far from the nearest town, but the desert had a way of swallowing time and distance alike. All he wanted now was a quiet place to rest. A bed, 4 walls. A roof, somewhere safe where he could set down his pack, lean back and feel the day's weight lift from his shoulders. He had no grand plans, no desire for adventure tonight, just sleep. The sun disappeared completely, leaving the desert bathed in the soft, silver light of dusk. Ethan pulled his worn hat lower over his eyes and scanned the horizon. In the distance, between the shadowed rocks, he thought he saw the outline of a small village. Smoke curled lazily into the sky, a faint scent of wood fire carried on the wind. Relief and caution warred inside him. Relief, because any sign of human habitation promised warmth and food. Caution, because the desert often held danger even in friendly places. He guided his horse toward the village, careful to keep the animal calm. Horses, like humans, could sense tension. Ethan whispered softly to the creature, stroking its neck and rubbing its ears. "Almost there, buddy, almost there." The closer he got, the more he noticed about the village. It was quiet, almost too quiet, but there were signs of life. A few adobe houses stood in a loose cluster, their walls warm and golden in the fading light. Smoke rose from several chimneys, and he could hear faint sounds, the laughter of children, the low murmur of voices, the clatter of something being set on a table. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Ethan guided his horse into the central clearing of the village, looking around for someone to approach. His eyes fell on a small adobe house with a fire glowing in the doorway. The scent of cooking drifted toward him, rich and inviting. He nudged his horse gently, and the animal stepped forward, sniffing the air. From inside the house came the sound of laughter, a warm, melodic sound that made Ethan pause. He could see movement behind the doorway, figures moving about, preparing what must be an evening meal. He took a deep breath and stepped closer, hoping for a friendly face. A woman appeared at the doorway. Her dark hair was tied back neatly, and her eyes were sharp but kind. She looked him up and down, noticing his dusty clothes and tired posture. Without a word, she nodded toward the doorway. "You can stay for the night," she said simply. Ethan blinked, surprised. "Thank you," he said. "I don't mean to intrude. I'm looking for a place to rest." "You're welcome here," she replied. Her voice was calm, almost musical, but there was strength in it too. "Come in." He led his horse to a small stable at the back of the house and tied it carefully. The animal's soft whinny echoed in the quiet evening, and Ethan patted its neck before heading inside. The house was simple but warm. A fire burned in the hearth, casting flickering light across the room. The smell of food made his stomach growl despite the exhaustion he felt. There were 3 women in the kitchen, each busy with different tasks. One was stirring a pot, another chopping vegetables, and the third was setting the table. They moved with quiet confidence, each absorbed in her work but aware of Ethan's presence. "Sit," the first woman said, gesturing to a wooden chair by the fire. "You look like you've been riding all day." Ethan obeyed, lowering himself into the chair and letting out a long sigh. His body ached, and for a moment he simply closed his eyes and felt the heat of the fire on his face. The women watched him quietly for a moment, exchanging small, unspoken glances. They were 3 widows, Ethan would later learn, each with her own story of loss and survival. The desert had taken much from them, yet it had also made them strong. They had built this small home together, sharing their skills and labor, making a life even in the harshest of circumstances. They had learned to depend on each other, and now a stranger had arrived. Dinner was simple but hearty: roasted meat, fresh vegetables, and warm bread. Ethan ate quietly, grateful for the food, and tried not to stare too much at the women around him. Yet he couldn't help noticing their glances, small smiles, and quiet gestures as they served him. He sensed curiosity and something more, though he wasn't yet sure what. After the meal, one of the women, the tallest of the three, brought him a blanket. "You can sleep by the fire tonight," she said. "It's safest there." Ethan nodded, accepting the blanket. "Thank you," he said again, meaning it more than words could express. Sleep was all he wanted, but there was something about this place, about these women, that made him pause. They seemed strong and independent, yet kind and caring. A stranger in a foreign land could easily take advantage of their hospitality, but Ethan had no intention of doing so. He had no plans beyond rest. As he lay down by the fire, listening to the quiet rustle of the desert wind outside, he reflected on his journey. The trail had been long and lonely, and the desert had a way of stripping life down to its bare essentials: food, water, shelter, and safety. And here in this small adobe house, he had all of that, even if only for one night. The women moved about the room quietly, tidying up after the meal. Ethan felt their eyes on him occasionally, and he sensed an unspoken question. Who was he, and what did he want? He didn't answer immediately. He just lay there exhausted, letting the warmth of the fire seep into his bones. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly, dark and mysterious. But inside, in the small home filled with the scent of food and the soft glow of firelight, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: a sense of safety. He didn't yet know the stories of these women, or the challenges they had faced. He didn't yet know the secrets they carried in their hearts. But for tonight, that didn't matter. Tonight, he had a bed, a fire, and a place to rest. As sleep began to take him, Ethan realized that even the simplest desires, food, warmth, and rest, could lead to unexpected encounters and new chapters in life. He drifted into dreams, unaware that this quiet night would be the beginning of a story far more complicated than he had ever imagined. The desert outside remained silent, vast, and watchful, holding its mysteries close, while inside, three women shared the space with a stranger who sought nothing more than a place to sleep. And so, the cowboy, weary and humble, found himself at the threshold of a story that would change the lives of all involved, though he did not yet know it. For now, he slept, and the desert night wrapped the village in quiet serenity, as the first sparks of curiosity and connection flickered quietly among the three widows who had opened their home to a stranger. Ethan woke the next morning to the soft glow of sunlight streaming through the small window of the adobe house. The warmth on his face felt gentle, almost comforting after the cold, restless nights on the desert trail. He stretched slowly, feeling the stiffness in his muscles, and took a deep breath. The scent of fresh bread and cooking meat filled the room, making his stomach growl. He noticed the three women moving about with quiet precision. One was kneading dough, another was tending a small fire outside the kitchen, and the third was gathering fresh herbs from a nearby pot. Each woman moved with confidence and grace, accustomed to managing the household and the small garden that supplied their food. Their harmony was impressive, a balance of cooperation and independence. Ethan didn't speak at first. He simply observed, careful not to intrude. He had spent many mornings on the trail alone, but there was something different about this place. Here, life had a rhythm that was steady and peaceful, yet underneath it, he could sense a strength shaped by hardship. He didn't yet know their names, but he could see the bond between them. They were more than friends. They were companions, relying on each other in a world that often demanded too much of one person alone. Finally, the tallest of the women looked up and smiled at him. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was soft, yet it carried a quiet authority. "Sleep well?" Ethan nodded. "Better than I have in days, thank you." The woman inclined her head. "You're welcome, I'm Ahioka. These are Nayeli and Tayanita." She gestured to the other two, who nodded politely. Ethan felt a small pang of gratitude. Names gave a person a presence, a sense of identity. It made the space feel more like a home and less like a temporary shelter. Breakfast was simple but filling: flatbread, eggs, and roasted vegetables. Ethan sat at the wooden table, quietly enjoying the food while the women worked around him. He tried to keep his eyes down, not wanting to seem rude, but he couldn't help noticing the way they moved with purpose, each action deliberate yet seemingly effortless. There was a quiet elegance in their work, a discipline born of necessity and care. Ahioka spoke first, breaking the silence. "Where are you headed?" she asked, her tone curious but not prying. Ethan hesitated. Travelers were often met with suspicion, and though these women seemed kind, he knew the world could be unpredictable. Yet there was something in her eyes, a blend of curiosity and kindness, that made him feel he could answer honestly. "I'm headed west," he said finally. "Just moving from town to town, looking for work and a place to rest along the way." Naomi glanced up from her chopping, raising an eyebrow. The desert is not easy for travelers. Many get lost or find themselves in trouble. Ethan gave a small smile. "I know, I've been lucky so far." Anita, the quietest of the three, finally spoke. "And what about a place to belong? Do you ever think about that?" Her question was soft, almost hesitant, but it carried weight. Ethan thought about it. For years, he had wandered, always moving, never staying. Belonging was a luxury he had never allowed himself. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but mostly I just want to keep moving." Ahioka nodded slowly. "Movement keeps you alive," she said, almost to herself. "But even the strongest travelers need a place to rest." Ethan finished his breakfast and helped with the dishes, feeling an unexpected sense of connection. He had expected nothing more than a meal and a place to sleep, yet the quiet domestic rhythm of the women intrigued him. They worked seamlessly together, supporting one another, yet there was also a playfulness in their interactions, a shared laughter over small mistakes, gentle teasing, and nods of approval for a job well done. As the morning stretched into afternoon, Ethan offered to help with the chores. He carried water from the nearby well, swept the small courtyard, and even tried his hand at chopping firewood. The women watched him closely, sometimes with amusement, sometimes with a hint of admiration. Ethan was careful, deliberate, and willing to learn. He could feel their eyes studying him, noting his abilities and his quiet demeanor. It was then that he noticed something unexpected. Each woman seemed subtly to compete for his attention, though not in an obvious or aggressive way. Ahioka would ask him for help with heavy tasks, smiling when he succeeded. Naomi would linger nearby when he worked, offering advice or gently teasing him about his technique. Anita, who had been quiet most of the morning, began to tell small stories, sharing pieces of her life and asking him questions about his own. Ethan felt a mixture of surprise and unease. He had come seeking only rest, yet here were three women who seemed genuinely interested in him, each expressing it in her own quiet way. He didn't know how to respond, and the thought of choosing or favoring one felt impossible. For now, he focused on helping and being respectful, hoping that his actions spoke louder than words. By midday, the air had warmed considerably, and the desert sun beat down relentlessly. Ethan and the women gathered outside to tend the small garden, watering vegetables and herbs. The work was hard, but the rhythm of labor and conversation made it feel lighter. Ahioka told him stories of the desert, of storms and droughts, of survival and perseverance. Naomi shared tales of her family, of losses and lessons learned. Anita spoke quietly, recounting small memories of days long past, with laughter and a hint of sadness intertwined. Ethan listened, realizing that he was learning not just about the land, but about life in a place that demanded resilience and courage. Each woman had her own story, her own scars, and yet together they had created a life that was both practical and rich in meaning. He admired their strength, their ability to support one another, and their willingness to welcome a stranger into their home. As the afternoon turned to evening, Ethan felt a sense of peace he had not known for a long time. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The women prepared a second meal, and Ethan helped where he could, carrying water, chopping vegetables, and tending the fire. The quiet camaraderie that had developed over the day made the house feel warm in more ways than one. After dinner, they all sat outside, watching the stars emerge in the clear desert sky. Ethan leaned back, tired but content, feeling the cool breeze on his face. The women sat nearby, talking softly among themselves, occasionally glancing at him. He realized that this night would be different from the last. There was an unspoken understanding, a connection that had grown in a single day. Ahioka spoke first, breaking the comfortable silence. "You have a quiet strength," she said. "You do not seek attention, yet you notice everything. You help without asking for thanks. That is rare." Ethan felt a warmth in his chest. "I just try to do what I can," he said humbly. Naomi smiled. "It is more than just doing. It is how you carry yourself, how you respect what is here, what is living, and what is shared." Tayanita softly added, "Even strangers can leave a mark if they are careful." Ethan thought about the day, about the quiet power of these women, and the unexpected way they had drawn him into their lives. He had come seeking nothing more than rest, yet he had found something richer: connection, understanding, and a glimpse of belonging. As the night deepened, the desert grew silent except for the soft rustling of wind through the rocks and the occasional cry of an owl. Ethan prepared to sleep again, this time with a sense of anticipation rather than mere relief. He didn't yet know what the next day would bring, but he felt ready to meet it, surrounded by women who were as strong as they were kind, and by a small house that had become a temporary sanctuary. For the first time in weeks, Ethan Harper felt that perhaps the desert, so often lonely and harsh, could also hold moments of unexpected warmth. And as he lay down by the fire once more, he knew that tomorrow would not just be another day of travel. It would be another day in a story that was only just beginning, one that he could not yet fully understand, but one that promised connection, challenge, and discovery. And so, the cowboy who had arrived seeking only a place to sleep found himself staying a little longer than he had planned, drawn by the quiet strength, the laughter, and the warmth of three remarkable women who had opened their home, and perhaps their hearts to a stranger. Morning sun rose slowly over the desert, casting golden light across the adobe homes and the small courtyard where Ethan had spent the previous day helping with chores. The air was crisp, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of sage and dry earth. Ethan stretched, feeling the lingering ache in his shoulders and legs from riding and working, but there was also a strange satisfaction in the tiredness. He stepped outside to find the three women already at work. Ahioka was sweeping the courtyard, her movements smooth and purposeful. Naomi tended the small herb garden, kneeling in the dirt as she carefully checked each plant for signs of growth or disease. Tayanita carried a basket of vegetables from the garden to the kitchen, humming softly under her breath. Ethan paused to watch, marveling at the harmony of their work. Each had her own tasks, yet together they moved like a single, well-practiced team. "Good morning," Ethan said, his voice breaking the quiet rhythm. "Morning," Ahioka replied, glancing up with a small smile. "Sleep well," Ethan nodded. "Better than I expected. Thank you again for letting me stay." Ahioka's eyes softened. "You are welcome here. You are tired from the trail, and a weary traveler should find rest wherever he can." Naomi glanced up, brushing soil from her hands. "And you are strong. You helped with the chores yesterday. Most travelers would have simply rested all day." Ethan smiled politely. "I'm happy to help. It's the least I can do for your hospitality." The women exchanged glances, subtle smiles playing across their faces. Ethan noticed a small spark of amusement in their eyes, though he could not yet understand its cause. For the moment, he focused on breakfast and simple tasks, trying to avoid thinking too deeply about the curious attention of his hosts. After breakfast, Ahioka suggested that they go to the nearby canyon to collect firewood for the week. Ethan agreed, eager to get some exercise and enjoy the fresh desert air. The canyon was a short ride from the village, but the path was rough, winding between large boulders and patches of thorny shrubs. Ethan led the horse slowly, carefully watching the trail, while the women followed with smaller packs and baskets, picking up branches and kindling as they went. During the walk, the three women began to speak, each in her own way. Ahioka asked Ethan about the places he had traveled, the towns he had passed, and the people he had met. Her questions were practical, yet her eyes sparkled with curiosity. Ethan answered with short stories of the trail, careful to remain honest without revealing too much of himself. Nayeli, on the other hand, seemed more playful. She challenged Ethan to small contests along the trail, who could spot the most bird tracks, who could leap over a small ravine first, who could carry the heaviest bundle of wood. Ethan accepted, laughing quietly as he tried to keep pace with her energy. He realized that these games were not just entertainment. They were a way of understanding him, of gauging his strength, patience, and character. Tayanita remained quieter than the other two, but she observed Ethan closely. She asked him about his dreams and fears, not with judgment but with gentle curiosity. "Do you ever wish to stay in one place?" she asked softly as they crossed a small wooden bridge. "Or is moving always better?" Ethan paused, thinking carefully before he answered. "I've always moved. I don't know if staying would suit me, but sometimes I wonder what it would be like to have a place to call home." His words were soft, almost a whisper. Tayanita nodded, her eyes reflecting understanding, though she said nothing further. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, the canyon grew warmer. Sweat ran down Ethan's back, and the women's faces glistened in the sun, but none of them complained. They worked together, gathering branches and stacking them neatly in piles to carry home. Ethan noticed that each woman seemed subtly to compete for his attention. Ahioka would pause near him, offering advice or encouragement. Nayeli would laugh at his mistakes, teasing him in a way that made him smile despite his fatigue. Tayanita would occasionally brush his sleeve lightly when passing by, as if leaving a small, deliberate mark of presence. Ethan felt a mix of surprise and unease. He had come seeking nothing but rest, yet here he was, part of a quiet, unspoken competition he didn't understand. He wasn't unkind or dismissive, but he didn't know how to respond to three women whose intentions seemed gentle but persistent. All he could do was remain polite, respectful, and attentive to their needs. When the task was complete, they began the walk back to the village, carrying the bundles of firewood. The sun began its slow descent, turning the canyon walls a deep red-orange. Ethan and the women paused at the edge of a small cliff to admire the view. The desert stretched endlessly before them, rolling hills and mesas fading into the distance. The silence was peaceful, broken only by the wind and the distant cry of a hawk. Ahioka spoke first, her voice low and reflective. "The desert teaches patience," she said. "It teaches that strength alone is not enough. You must also learn to wait, to watch, and to care for what you hold close." Ethan nodded. "I've learned that the hard way. I've spent many nights wondering if I was doing enough, if I was strong enough. Sometimes it feels like the desert has no mercy." Nayeli laughed softly, a musical sound that echoed off the rocks. "It has no mercy for the careless," she said. "But those who respect it, who work with it rather than against it, find a strange kind of reward." Tayanita stepped closer to Ethan, her voice barely above a whisper. "And sometimes the reward is not the land but the people who share it with you." Ethan looked at her, then at the other two women. He realized that this day, which had begun as nothing more than work and chores, had become a delicate dance of connection, observation, and quiet challenge. The women were strong, independent, and capable, yet there was a gentle insistence in their actions, a desire to draw him in, to see who he truly was. Back at the village, they stacked the firewood neatly outside the house and prepared a simple evening meal. Ethan helped as best he could, carrying water and chopping vegetables. The women's attention remained on him, subtle but persistent. They laughed, teased, and spoke softly, creating a rhythm that was almost magnetic. Ethan felt both flattered and cautious. He did not want to encourage competition or create tension, yet he could not ignore the growing bond that had developed over the day. After dinner, the group sat outside, watching the stars emerge in the vast desert sky. The night was calm, filled with the gentle sounds of nocturnal creatures and the whispering wind. Ethan leaned back, exhausted but content, reflecting on the day's events. The simple chores, the quiet competitions, the small gestures of attention, all had revealed layers of the women's personalities and the complex dynamic he had entered. Ahioka spoke first, breaking the quiet. "You have patience," she said. "You do not rush. You observe, you learn." "That is rare," Ethan nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest. "I've always tried to do what is right, not for praise but because it feels right." Naomi smiled, leaning slightly toward him. "And yet your actions speak louder than words. It is easy to see your intentions." Tayanita softly added, "Even in strangers one can sense care, and care leaves a mark." Ethan felt the weight of her words. He had come seeking nothing more than rest, yet he found himself drawn into a delicate web of attention, respect, and subtle rivalry. He did not yet know how it would resolve, but he understood one thing clearly. The women were strong, independent, and capable, and they were interested in him not just as a visitor but as a potential part of their lives. As the night deepened, Ethan prepared for sleep, careful to remain polite and respectful. The women moved quietly around the house, tidying and preparing for the next day. He lay down near the fire, feeling the warmth on his face and the quiet energy of the home. He did not yet know what the following days would bring, but he felt a mixture of anticipation, curiosity, and a strange sense of comfort. For the first time since he had left town, Ethan Harper realized that life could be more than a trail and a bed for the night. It could be connection, companionship, and the subtle beauty of shared effort and attention. The desert outside remained vast, silent, and mysterious, but inside the small adobe house, something new was taking shape, a delicate balance of curiosity, challenge, and unspoken affection that promised to grow in ways Ethan could not yet imagine. And so, the cowboy who had sought only a place to sleep found himself caught in the quiet rivalry of three remarkable women. Each wanted his attention in her own way, and each tested him, not with force or demand, but with patience, observation, and subtle gestures. Ethan knew he must tread carefully, for the path ahead was no longer just the desert trail. It was a path of human hearts, delicate, complex, and full of possibilities. The next morning, Ethan woke to the faint light of dawn spilling through the small window. The desert was quiet except for the occasional chirp of a bird or the distant bleat of a goat. He rubbed his eyes and stretched, feeling the familiar aches of travel and labor, yet a sense of anticipation stirred in his chest. Yesterday had been long and challenging, but it had also opened his eyes to the strength, warmth, and complexity of the three women who had taken him in. As he stepped outside, he noticed Ahioka preparing the morning fire while Naomi tended the small garden, and Tayanita gathered water from the well. Each moved with grace and confidence, yet there was a noticeable spark in their eyes when they looked at him, a subtle reminder of the quiet attention he had been receiving over the past few days. Ethan felt a mix of curiosity and unease. He had come seeking nothing more than a place to sleep, yet he now realized he was part of a delicate balance, a web of interest and subtle rivalry that he did not fully understand. Breakfast was simple: flatbread, fresh eggs, and roasted vegetables. The women spoke little at first, focusing on their tasks, but the occasional glance or small smile revealed an undercurrent of unspoken feelings. Ethan noticed it too. He appreciated their kindness, but he also understood the responsibility of being in a place where hearts were quietly entangled with his presence. After breakfast, Ahioka suggested they take the horse to a nearby stream to fetch water and check on a small herd of goats. Ethan agreed, sensing that such excursions were as much about understanding the land and the women as they were about daily chores. The walk was long but pleasant, and the women continued their quiet tests, playful challenges, and subtle gestures that revealed their interest. Ahioka walked beside Ethan, speaking in a low voice about the desert and its lessons. "The land is not just a place to live," she said. "It teaches patience, resilience, and observation. Those who listen learn much." Ethan nodded. He had learned the hard way that patience and observation could mean the difference between safety and danger in the wild. Nayeli, as usual, took a more playful approach. She challenged Ethan to a small race to the stream, laughing heartily when he tried to keep pace with her quick steps. The laughter was light, infectious, and unexpected after the long days of travel. Ethan found himself smiling more freely than he had in weeks, enjoying the simple moments of joy amidst the labor and tension. Anita remained quieter, but her presence was felt. She spoke softly about the land, the animals, and her memories of the village before tragedy had left her widowed. Her words were gentle, reflective, and full of wisdom. Ethan listened intently, realizing that she had a depth of understanding and sensitivity that complemented Ahioka's practicality and Nayeli's energy. Together, they formed a balance, and he was caught in the center, learning about each of them in small, subtle ways. As they reached the stream, the women began filling their buckets and checking the health of the goats. Ethan joined in, helping to carry the water and ensuring the animals were safe. While the work was straightforward, the interactions were delicate. Each woman had a way of drawing his attention without demanding it outright. Ahioka would pause near him, offering advice or support. Nayeli would laugh at minor mistakes, teasing him in a way that made him feel both encouraged and challenged. Anita would brush past him or offer a quiet word of appreciation, leaving him aware of her presence in a subtle, profound way. During a brief rest by the stream, Ethan reflected on the situation. He had sought only a place to sleep, yet he found himself surrounded by three remarkable women, each with her own strength, warmth, and quiet desire for connection. He did not know how to navigate this situation without hurting anyone's feelings. He wanted to respect their kindness and interest while remaining true to his own need for honesty and simplicity. The journey back to the village was slower, filled with conversation, laughter, and small moments of shared experience. Ethan began to understand that the women's interest in him was not merely fleeting or superficial. They were drawn to his quiet strength, his patience, and his willingness to engage in daily life without arrogance or demand. He felt a growing respect for each of them, yet he remained cautious, knowing that he could not offer more than honesty and effort at this point. When they returned to the village, they spent the afternoon repairing fences and tending the small garden. Each woman continued her subtle tests and gentle attention, and Ethan responded with care, patience, and respect. He learned to notice the small gestures, the way Ahioka's hand lingered on the fence when passing him, the light in Nayeli's eyes when he succeeded in a task, the soft words of Anita when she passed by. Each interaction was a reminder that he was part of a delicate, unspoken dynamic that required thoughtfulness and awareness. As the day wore on, the sun dipped low, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Ethan and the women gathered outside, sharing a quiet meal by the fire. The evening was calm, the desert peaceful, and the air filled with the gentle sounds of night creatures. The women spoke softly, sharing stories of the past, reflections on their lives and hopes for the future. Ethan listened, realizing that these moments were as important as the work or the chores. They were the foundation of trust and connection. Ahioka spoke first, her voice low and thoughtful. "You have stayed with us for several days now. You work, you listen, and you care. That is not something many travelers do." Ethan felt a warmth in his chest. "I am grateful for your kindness," he said. "You have given me more than a place to rest. You have shown me patience, generosity, and friendship." Naomi leaned forward slightly, a playful spark in her eyes. "You do not realize, do you? Even your quiet presence leaves an impression. We notice small things about you, even when you do not speak of them." Tayanita's voice was gentle, almost a whisper. "Even strangers can touch our lives in ways we do not expect, and sometimes that touch leaves a mark that lingers." Ethan realized that the day had been more than labor and chores. It had been a careful dance of observation, challenge, and connection. The women's interest in him was not casual. It was considered, gentle, and persistent. He understood that he must navigate this situation with honesty, respect, and care. He could not promise more than he felt, yet he could recognize the bond that was forming in quiet, meaningful ways. As night deepened, Ethan prepared for sleep, reflecting on the day. He felt a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. He had come seeking only rest, yet he had found connection, friendship, and subtle affection. The women had tested him in quiet ways, revealing their interest and their strength, yet they had done so without force or demand. He admired them for their courage, independence, and kindness. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly, dark and mysterious. Inside, the small adobe house was filled with the soft glow of firelight, quiet laughter, and the gentle presence of three remarkable women. Ethan Harper, the weary traveler, realized that his simple desire for a place to sleep had led him into a complex and delicate story, one that involved trust, care, and the unspoken emotions of those who had welcomed him into their lives. He closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the fire and the subtle energy of the home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for connection, and perhaps a turning point in the delicate balance he had become part of. For now, he allowed himself to rest, knowing that the days ahead would test his patience, his understanding, and his ability to navigate the quiet but powerful bonds forming around him. Ethan understood one thing clearly. The desert could be harsh, unforgiving, and lonely, but it could also offer moments of profound connection, trust, and understanding. He had found such a moment in this small home, among three women who were as strong as they were gentle, and whose quiet attention had begun to leave an impression on him he would not soon forget. And so, the cowboy who had come seeking nothing but a place to sleep realized that his journey had changed. He was no longer just a traveler passing through the desert. He had become part of a small, intricate story of connection, care, and subtle rivalry. The coming days would reveal how these bonds would grow, shift, and perhaps bring clarity to the quiet tensions that had begun to stir in the hearts of all involved. The next morning, the desert was calm and quiet. The sky glowed with soft shades of pink and gold as the sun began to rise. Ethan Harper woke feeling a mixture of peace and anticipation. He knew that today would be different. The past days had revealed the warmth, strength, and subtle affections of the three women who had welcomed him into their home. He had come seeking only rest, yet he now found himself part of a story much larger than he had expected. Ethan stepped outside to see Ahioka tending the fire while Naomi gathered water from the well and Tayanita arranged fresh herbs on the windowsill. Each woman moved with grace and precision, yet there was a noticeable attention in their eyes when they glanced at him. Ethan felt both honored and uneasy. He had learned over the past days that their interest in him was sincere, yet he could not pretend that he fully understood the emotions that now surrounded him. Breakfast was simple, but shared with care. They spoke gently, exchanging small stories and reflections on the past days. Ethan helped where he could, carrying water and passing bread. He noticed the subtle glances, the quiet smiles, and the small gestures that spoke volumes about their feelings. Each woman seemed determined in her own way to connect with him, and Ethan knew that he had to respond with honesty and sensitivity. After breakfast, Ahioka spoke quietly but with determination. "Ethan, you have been with us for several days. You have worked, shared your time, and shown patience, but we must speak honestly. You are part of our lives now, whether you realize it or not." Ethan felt a mix of anxiety and understanding. He had known this moment would come. He had come seeking only a place to sleep, yet he had formed connections that could not be ignored. He nodded slowly. "I understand," he said. "I never intended to stay long, but I also cannot ignore the bonds that have formed here." Naomi leaned forward slightly, her eyes bright with emotion. "We did not expect you to stay so long, yet in these few days you have become part of our world. We feel connected to you, and we want to know if you feel the same." Tayanita's voice was soft but firm. "We do not ask for promises you cannot give. We only ask for honesty. You have been kind, helpful, and present. That is enough for us to care." Ethan took a deep breath. He felt a lump in his throat as he considered his words carefully. "I am grateful for your kindness, your patience, and the trust you have shown me. I care for each of you deeply, but I cannot pretend to offer more than honesty. My path is still the trail, still the road ahead. I cannot stay forever, even though I wish I could." There was a quiet stillness as the women absorbed his words. Ethan felt the weight of the moment, knowing that honesty was the only way to respect their feelings. The desert outside remained silent, yet inside the small adobe house, the emotions were intense, subtle, and powerful. Ahioka was the first to speak again. "Then we must respect your choice," she said, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. "You came seeking rest, and you have found it here. We cannot hold you against your will, nor would we try, but we will remember your presence and we will honor the time we shared." Naomi's eyes glistened, yet she nodded. "We may wish for more, yet we know that care and honesty are greater gifts than any promise of permanence. You have given us that gift." Tayanita quietly added, "Even strangers can leave marks on our hearts, and those marks remain. You will always be part of our story, even if your path leads elsewhere." Ethan felt a deep sense of gratitude and respect. He realized that the women's strength, kindness, and understanding were extraordinary. They had welcomed a stranger, offered him warmth, food, and care, and had expressed their feelings without force, demand, or expectation. Their grace and courage left a mark on him that would never fade. The remainder of the morning was spent in quiet activity. Ethan helped with small chores, packed his few belongings, and prepared the horse for the journey ahead. The women worked alongside him, sharing smiles, small touches, and quiet conversation. There was no bitterness, no resentment, only respect, understanding, and the unspoken acknowledgement of the bonds that had formed over the past days. As the sun climbed higher, casting warm light over the village, Ethan mounted his horse. He looked back at the small adobe house, the women standing in the courtyard, their eyes reflecting both pride and sadness. He felt a lump in his throat, but he knew this was the right moment. "I cannot stay," he said softly, addressing the three women together. "But I will carry the memory of your kindness, strength, and care with me always. You have given me more than a place to rest. You have given me understanding, trust, and friendship. For that, I am deeply grateful." Ahioka stepped forward and placed a hand briefly on the horse's reins. "Go with care, Ethan Harper. The trail is long and the desert can be harsh, but your heart will guide you." Naomi reached out, giving a small wave. "Remember the laughter, the work, and the quiet moments. They will keep you strong when the journey feels hard." Tayanita, her voice barely above a whisper, added, "And remember that even the smallest connections can leave lasting impressions. You will carry a piece of us with you, just as we carry a piece of you." Ethan nodded, unable to speak for a moment. He felt gratitude, affection, and a sense of closure that was rare in his wandering life. He urged the horse forward slowly, casting one last glance at the women standing in the courtyard. Their faces reflected acceptance, understanding, and a subtle, enduring warmth. The trail ahead stretched endlessly, bright and open under the clear desert sky. Ethan rode slowly at first, savoring the moment, feeling the weight of the past days and the emotions they had carried. He thought of Ahioka, Nayeli, and Tayanita, not as women who had competed for his attention, but as remarkable individuals who had offered him something more precious than anything he had expected: respect, trust, and human connection. As he rode away, the village became smaller in the distance, yet its memory remained vivid in his mind. He remembered the quiet laughter, the shared work, the subtle gestures of care, and the honest conversations that had shaped the days he had spent there. He knew that no matter how far he traveled, the lessons of these days would remain with him, guiding his choices, his interactions, and his understanding of human kindness. The desert stretched out before him, vast, silent, and beautiful. Ethan rode with a renewed sense of purpose, not only as a traveler but as someone who had learned the value of honesty, connection, and respect. He realized that the journey was not just about moving from place to place. It was about the people he met, the bonds he formed, and the moments that left a lasting mark on his heart. By midday, he had reached a small ridge overlooking the village. From this vantage point, he could see the adobe homes, the courtyard, and the figures of the three women tending to their daily routines. Ethan felt a wave of gratitude and affection. He knew that this was not the end of the story, but a chapter in a larger journey, one that included lessons about care, resilience, and the unexpected ways that human lives could intersect. As the sun began its descent, Ethan paused to rest his horse and reflect. He thought about the women and the quiet power they had shown, the way they had welcomed him without expectation, challenged him without force, and connected with him without demand. They had taught him more about human kindness and understanding than he had ever expected to learn on the trail. Ethan continued riding, the village slowly disappearing behind the distant hills. The desert stretched endlessly, a place of both hardship and beauty. Yet he felt a sense of peace and fulfillment he had rarely known. The cowboy who had arrived seeking only a place to sleep had discovered something far richer: connection, respect, and a glimpse of human warmth that would stay with him forever. By nightfall, he had set up camp under the stars, the fire crackling softly beside him. He thought of Ahioka, Nayeli, and Tayanita as he prepared to sleep. Their lessons, their kindness, and their quiet strength filled his thoughts. The desert was still, vast, and full of challenges, yet Ethan Harper felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. And so, the cowboy rode on, carrying with him not only memories of a place to rest, but the enduring spirit of three remarkable women who had offered him a gift far greater than comfort, a gift of understanding, trust, and human connection. Though paths would diverge and the trail would stretch endlessly, the story of their shared days would remain, a quiet reminder that even the briefest encounters could leave the deepest marks. Ethan Harper, the traveler, continued forward, heartened by the lessons of the desert, the warmth of the women he had met, and the knowledge that kindness and honesty could create bonds stronger than distance or time. And though he did not know where the trail would lead next, he rode with a steady heart, carrying the memory of the village, the adobe house, and the three women who had forever changed the way he understood rest, care, and human connection.